My name is Michelle Krupa, and I am a 5th grade teacher at Milburn Elementary School. And I'm presenting to an empty classroom because we didn't have permission to get all of our kids' videotaped. So I'm just going to kind of go through the lesson with you that I did with my class for this first lesson, for our first assignment. So to begin with, we are talking about explorers, and we first all got a sheet with vocabulary on it and took like a day or at least one class period to look up the words and talk about the words. So the first thing we focused on was vocabulary. And so then the day of our first lesson, we kind of broke down the vocabulary that we had first talked about when we initially passed out the vocabulary. And so now we're just going to talk about the vocabulary in this lesson. And so to begin with, I wrote the words empire, encounter, monarch, Renaissance, compass, and city-state on the board. And so we basically had a discussion about these words, and I had the kids get out the vocabulary that they had already looked up, and I had them share with a partner what their definition was, for instance, for empire. And then they did one for encounter and so on and so forth. So we kind of went through that vocabulary again, but just focused on the vocabulary for this lesson. So once we were done with the vocabulary and we had gone through and understood exactly what we were talking about with each of these words, then what I did is we moved on to building background. And so for this lesson, it's basically talking about the world in the 1400s, and it's breaking down exploration, I guess how the world was prior to exploration within the different continents. So it went through the Americas, and it went through Asia and Africa, and it focused on each of those. So before we even went into any of that, I built background. And so the questions that I had them discuss was basically world cultures, and we talked about accessing prior knowledge about trading, which we had gone and done a trading field trip prior to explorers with Native Americans. We went to the Route Museum in Buffalo Grove. And so they had some experience with trading, which was really good for my EL students because they were able to, connect with that. So we talked about trading and how trading affected, import and export, and how it differed from continents, and basically focus on the word trading with that, because the reason why we had to explore other places is because trading got stopped in Asia, and they had to find another route around Asia. Europe had to go another way to get to Asia to find the goods that they wanted, because they had a trail that they went through, but it got closed off by the Turks. So anyway, bottom line is trading is a big deal, and it was kind of like the fuel to exploration. So after we talked about trading in general and importing and exporting, and looking at the bottom of an item and saying, oh hey, this is made in China, or this is made in Taiwan, or this is made in Japan, and knowing that not everything comes from here and that we get it from other places. And that's one of the reasons why we explored in the first place, was to make sure that we could get goods from other places and work with other countries and things like that. So after we accessed prior knowledge, we basically went into the lesson. So what I've done is I broke down the lesson 2 ways. Okay, to begin with, I had the kids open their social studies book. So they went and they grabbed their social studies book out of their desk, and they each were told to go to page 106. So they go to 106 in their book, which is the world in the 1400s, and they were each assigned a group and a section within that reading. So I'm not 100% sure if you can see, but on the ceiling I have different group categories. Okay, so I have red group, blue group, yellow group, green, orange, and pink. I also have them by letter. So it's A, B, C, D, E, and that's it. So I only have to E for letter groups and then 6 color groups. And so that kind of mixes up the groups, and actually you can't see this, but on their table they have a color and a letter. So this person right here has a green C. So they can either go to the green group or they can go to the C group, whatever one I choose that day. So that day I think I said letter groups. And so they went to their letter groups, they met over into their letter groups, and then we went over on the board what exactly they were going to be doing that day. And the reason I have this on is because I'm going to show you the PowerPoint that we do after we did the jigsaw and after we had the discussion about the jigsaw, which is the activity that I'm assigning them now. So I would tell the kids, get into your letter groups, and so they'd disperse into their letter groups. And then on the board, I would say, okay, so we're on page 106. Write that on the board so that everybody knows what page we're on. And then I would tell them what you're going to do today is we are going to jigsaw. And then, you know, there's some chatter and comments because this was something that we hadn't done before. And I actually asked them what they thought that meant, and some of them thought it had to do with puzzles, which totally makes sense, which was kind of funny. But then we actually talked about what we were going to do and how it's kind of like a puzzle where we're going to piece the lesson together, and then we're going to talk about it. So the connection was good. So anyway, I told them, okay, so A, B, C, D, E, okay, you're all going to be reading the same material. The only thing that's going to happen that is in your group, you're going to split, because it's about 5 kids per group, you're going to split the sections of the chapter and read those. So I would say, okay, so let's look in the chapter. Can anybody tell me what the first section and subtitle is? And somebody would raise their hand and they'd say the Americas. Okay, so I'd say, all right, so we have these sections in the book. One would be the Americas. Second would be, and then they would raise their hand again, and we would say Europe. Okay, so I'd write Europe down. And then after that is Asia. And I believe after that is Africa. And then it ends. That's the end of the lesson. Okay, so if there were 5 kids in a group, I might ask, the Americas is the longest section, so I would say, you know, 2 people do Americas and then 1 for the rest. Okay? And so all these groups here need to do the same thing. They need to read page 106 to page 111, each taking a section, and then I want you to write down some information as you're going and you're reading together as a group. Okay? So as they're reading, they're taking down information. Well, I'm sorry. They read separately in their group, and then they would talk amongst their group after they're done. So I would say, okay, so group A. You know, Sally, you're going to read about the Americas. Joe, you're going to read about Europe. Jack, you're going to read about Asia. And Sarah, you're going to read about Africa. And after you're done, you're all going to come together and you are going to share your information that you've learned. Now, this is typically when a lot of hands go up and they ask questions like, well, you know, what kind of information do I need to provide them? And what do they really need to know? And I said, okay, so let's focus on maybe 3 to 4 interesting things or facts in general about your section. Let's start with that. And so then I said, all right, go ahead. And so I would walk around to the different groups and I would see what they were doing, and I'd look over and, you know, make sure they were on task. And sometimes it would be, you know,